Hello and welcome to The Insider, a show designed to clue you into the biggest news, events and announcements inside the video games industry, discussing with you some things you may know, some things you may not, and glue holds it all together is a little bit of my own opinion. My name is Paul James, thank you very much for watching, and let's get for the episode. So we've seen this all before. Assassin's Creed Ragnarok has leaked. We'd already seen that previously, but there's been a new batch of leaks over the course of the last week that need addressing in this episode, and it's just another chink in the chain here. We've seen so much of this with the Assassin's Creed franchise over the journey, and in this week's episode of The Insider, we're going to look at the details from some of these leaks, what they contain, what they say, what we can read into, and we're going to break things down a little bit for you. So let's get into it. So the leaky ship has sprung another hole in the form of Assassin's Creed Ragnarok, and what really came of this were a whole host of reports about the gameplay and the many systems that are backing the experience. Now, how much of this remains to be true remains to be seen. Take everything that's discussed today like a pinch of salt, and any reports you read out there, don't wholeheartedly buy into these things until you hear official confirmation from Ubisoft, though the game's existence in and of itself, that is borderline certain at this point. I feel like even Jason Schreier might have said something at that point, and if he says something, you can bet your bottom dollar it's true. But the gameplay, let's dive into it. Now I'm going to be looking a little bit off camera here from time to time so I can address these things because there's a long list of features that are going to be coming into the game. So the first thing to discuss is the fact that drop-in, drop-out co-op, similar to what we saw in Assassin's Creed Unity, is coming back, supposedly. Now a lot of people, and I've seen anecdotally bits and pieces on the internet, a lot of people have kind of bristled over this, and I think what a lot of people are forgetting is that the drop-in, drop-out co-op wasn't the problem with Unity, especially at launch. The problem with Unity was the many visual bugs and a lot of technical problems. It wasn't that system itself or the many other systems that were included. In fact, technically, and if you go back and play Unity now, it's one of the better games in the franchise because they fixed all those visual problems, and what you're left with is a fantastic game with a big personality set in a great place in France. And it's a really fantastic game. The drop-in, drop-out co-op was one of my personal highlights from the game. Messing around with other people, learning the ropes, going exploring the city, tackling these missions in a host of different ways, and collaborating with others in the process was really quite cool. And I'm eager to see how they implement that in a new Assassin's Creed franchise entry, given the changes that we've seen to the franchise in the last two entries, Origins and Odyssey. Next, we've got some RPG systems. Now we're getting an RPG style class system that's being introduced, and that's going to have a knock-on effect to the various skill trees, what you can access, what you can't, but then how that kind of integrates into the overall leveling system. We're going to talk about that shortly. Next, there's some weapon types, more weapon types that are being introduced. Now in part, that's probably a byproduct of the location, the setting. If we're talking about Ragnarok, we're talking about Norse gods, so we're talking about that kind of northern Europe region, and to be fair, some of the reports have suggested that we're going to be sprawling quite wide. We're talking London, we're talking York, but we're also talking Paris again, or at least France, and other regions within Europe. So we're not staying right at the tippy top northern parts, we are kind of venturing down a little bit, if these reports are true. Now, the weapon types interest me because one of the things that did come up in that was the fact that weapon degradation is also present, and that for me is a big no-no. I know there's a lot of people that like it, and I mean Breath of the Wild is one of the biggest games in the world still after its launch in 2017, and people love everything that game did. I could not stand the weapon degradation in it and other games that we've seen out there. It's just not a system that really clicks with me. It's one that I hope can be maybe toggled somehow. If you don't want to play that way, a way that can infuriate people like myself, that you don't have to play with that, that'd be fantastic. But each their own. It's a single player experience, so I don't see how it couldn't be possible. And then when you're entering that co-op space, well, that's where some compromises might need to be made. So the next thing is the Hidden Blade, something that we've not seen in the last couple of Assassin's Creed entries, and it's a real staple of the franchise. So what it's the main reason for that, I presume, has been because it's basically been a one-hit KO device, and it kind of breaks the many RPG systems they're trying to implement. If you can just stealth around, just jab someone in the neck and they're dead. Well, it's coming back. So how they plan on implementing that remains to be seen. It is apparently going to have that one-hit KO sort of feature to it. So does that mean that there is a lessening of some of those RPG systems and that really heavy stats-driven aspects that we've seen in Origins, in Odyssey, that were informed by the likes of The Witcher 3? Well, that remains to be seen. But I'm glad the Hidden Blade is back, because it is a staple of the franchise and it needs to be there in some capacity. How they do that, we'll have to wait and see. More hiding locations. Now, we've seen the same old from the Assassin's Creed franchise for some time. Blend into a crowd, sit at a bench, jump into the haystack and wait there. Well, it looks like there's going to be little things like, see this giant mud puddle here. I can dive in that and I'll be soaked in mud, but I'll kind of disappear as a result. And similar sorts of things that are looking to be implemented there that'll really amplify and improve the stealth side of the game, something that has kind of gone missing since about Assassin's Creed 2, really. The first game was heavy stealth, and you could just kind of get through every mission just stealthing your way through, work your way through the crowd, kill no one except the main person you're after, and then stealth on out of there. And it's kind of become more of an action game in the years since, so it's good to see that component is coming back in some way, shape or form. Raids are apparently going to be a feature. Now, this really interested me. We've obviously seen Ubisoft dive into that space with things like The Division 2, and obviously the original Division as well. We see it with Ghost Recon. And it's really interesting to see how they'll integrate that into Ragnarok, or specifically the Assassin's Creed franchise. Maybe this is where the co-op aspect kind of comes into it. Apparently you can still do it solo, but that's the co-op thing. That's what co-op's made for. So I'd be really interested to see if that does come along, and if that is exactly what the co-op is supposed to lend itself to. And finally, we've got some skill leveling systems that are more like, I guess, Skyrim, for example. If anyone knows Elder Scrolls Skyrim, and most people do because it's still one of the biggest games in the world, almost 10 years later, it is a game where you had your overall level, but you were also, and that was a byproduct of the individual skills that you were leveling along the way. They're looking to bring that into this game, and that really kind of bodes well as far as I'm concerned. I really enjoyed that aspect of Skyrim, that I could really focus my talents specifically on certain skills, my time on certain skills, and as such I'd become more proficient in certain areas and more deficient in others. But it allowed me to play my way, and that's maybe going to lend itself to the stealth and those other systems that we've already spoken about, but I'm really excited to see that. So with the big stuff like the gameplay out of the way, and obviously our setting, let's kind of focus on some more miscellaneous, not necessarily directly related facts out of this whole thing. Firstly, the speculation is mounting that it's going to be a holiday 2020 release, but the real nugget that came out of this Assassin's Creed leak in the last few days has been the fact that it is apparently going to be announced at a PlayStation 5 event in February, which links into other rumours that have been lingering about a PlayStation event on the 5th of February. So maybe these two things are in fact two pieces of the same whole, and will click together nicely, and we'll see our PS5 and whatever comes of that. But alongside it, we'll get the debut of Assassin's Creed Ragnarok. We know PlayStation is not going to be at E3 this year, so how the game then features, if those two things are linking together, then that would suggest that there is still a continued partnership with the Assassin's Creed franchise and PlayStation. And the fact that PlayStation's not going to E3, what sort of knock-on effect does that create for Ubisoft? That's an interesting one that we need to look at as the year goes on. Ubisoft obviously has their own presentation, but what does that do to their show floor presence? How do they kind of integrate PlayStation into it? Because that is an important part of the partnership there. That all remains to be seen. The other leak that's come out of it, and I kind of spoke about it at the very beginning there have been leaks from GameStop and Amazon as well. There were some collector's editions that were spoiled there, and they were very promptly removed from the internet. But they suggested also that the game is going to be coming out holiday 2020. So I think it's fair, and if we link into the speculation and the theories about what's going to happen to the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, we can probably expect to see this game launching on those systems October, November. It could very well be a black flag situation where the game actually releases on the current generation a few weeks prior. They have a set release date, and then it gets a next-gen port or upgrade a few weeks later that comes out with the new consoles. That remains to be seen as well, but it's a really cool little wrinkle to factor in on top of it. Last thing, and something I've seen on the internet a little bit over the course of the days since these leaks, a lot of people asking, how does this keep happening? Now, the thing that we need to understand, and what, people asking, why do we see this all the time from Ubisoft games, but we don't see this from X or Y or whatever? You've got to think about how these games are developed. There's probably two franchises in the world that get leaked more than any other, and that's Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty. Now, Assassin's Creed, like Call of Duty, is developed by multiple teams scattered all over the world. There's thousands of people involved in this thing in various capacities, from marketing to development to publishing to blah, 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 blah. So many people know about it, which provides so many more opportunities for the game to leak in some capacity. It's why these things never stay secret. You add little insiders on top of that will speak to the likes of Jason Schreier and whatever, and you know that at some point this game is going to leak. Ragnarok did so quite some time ago. It's continuing to do so. It's hard to keep these things under lock and key when you are so big. So don't blame Ubisoft. Don't blame anyone through this thing. It's a shame that these things get leaked in advance, and it's always cool to kind of see that surprise drop that, oh my god, it's Assassin's Creed. There's a new one. It's set in Norse mythology, etc., etc. Assassin's Creed Boy Edition. Like, that's all fantastic. But it's just the reality we live in. When we're talking about corporations that as big as they are, with as many people involved as there are, these things are just going to happen. And I'm sure we expect to hear something about a new Call of Duty sometime soon.
The fate of Greece journeys with you.
And so that concludes this week's episode of The Insider. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, all those buttons down the bottom here, and hit that notification bell. That way you're alerted to every new episode that pops up on the channel. That includes Patched, more of The Insider, Player 2 Plays, like Game Review, Gamer School, and a whole bunch more. There's some great stuff there, so please be sure to go and check it out. Visit the website, player2.net.au, where you'll find reviews, previews, opinion pieces, news, features, links to our podcast series, Patched, which has an audio form, the Player 2 Pixelcast, which is back and firing, and Dev Diary, which returned for the first time this year, just yesterday. Graham Struthers, one of the co-founders of Devolver Digital, is on it. He's got some great stories to share, so go and check that out on podcast services. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/player2au, kicking a few bucks. At the lower tiers, you'll get early access to episodes, whilst at the higher tiers, you'll get monthly episode exclusives. Finally, there's Twitter. You can find me at Paul James Games, the website you'll find at player2au. And until next time, that has been this whole Assassin's Creed Ragnarok leaking situation wrapped up for now. We might have to revisit it later on. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.